The desert wind howled over the razor wire, carrying nothing but sand and silence. Inside the control tower, red lights blinked across a wall of monitors. Every gate, every door, every sensor inside the world's most secure prison, ADX Florence, was being tested again. A siren blared for just 2 seconds, sharp and cold, before the loudspeaker announced, "Containment breach drill complete. All systems operational." The officers in the tower nodded. Every test had one goal, to prove what the world already believed, that no one could ever escape from here. It was a phrase reporters loved to use, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But the real story of how ADX Florence earned that name began long before the walls were finished. It began with fear that the old system could no longer control the most dangerous men in America. Back in the early 1980s, before ADX even existed, America's federal prisons were in chaos. Violent gang leaders were running drug empires from their cells. Mob bosses were bribing guards. Bombers, spies, and terrorists were mixing with ordinary inmates, creating explosions, sometimes literal ones, inside overcrowded prisons. The worst cases were sent to Marion, Illinois, the country's highest security prison at the time. Then, one morning in 1983, everything changed. 2 correctional officers at Marion, Clifford and Robert, were stabbed to death by inmates just hours apart. The murders happened inside what was supposed to be the safest part of the prison. After that, the government had one message: never again. Marion went into permanent lockdown. But even that wasn't enough. Officials wanted a prison so controlled, so advanced, that nothing like that could ever happen again. A prison where violence, communication, and escape were not just prevented, they were impossible. In 1989, the Bureau of Prisons approved a secret design project in the high desert of Colorado. The location was chosen carefully, miles from any city, surrounded by mountains, far from roads and people. The site was flat, quiet, and dry, perfect for a fortress that would rise out of the earth like concrete armor. Architects and engineers were brought in under strict confidentiality. They weren't designing a building, they were designing a system. A machine made of stone and steel that could control every human function inside it: movement, vision, sound, even light. They called it the Administrative Maximum Facility, or ADX Florence. Every inch of it was planned for one purpose: absolute control. Each inmate would live alone in a single cell measuring 7 by 12 feet, made entirely of reinforced concrete. Even the furniture, bed, desk, stool, would be molded from concrete, impossible to move or break. The windows were just 4 inches wide and angled upward, showing nothing but the sky. There were no bars, only thick glass and remote locked doors made from solid steel. Even communication between inmates would be designed out of existence. Soundproof walls, double gates, and electronic surveillance would make talking or passing notes nearly impossible. Exercise yards were not open fields, they were small concrete pens with high walls and mesh ceilings, where prisoners could see only a slice of sunlight. The engineers built a network of electronic eyes, cameras, sensors, motion detectors, that could track every move. The prison would have no blind spots, no shadows. And it would be built with redundancy, meaning even if one door failed, another would seal behind it instantly. When construction began in 1991, locals in Florence, Colorado, watched in silence. At first, they didn't understand what was being built in the desert. Trucks brought in tons of steel and miles of wire. Helicopters hovered overhead carrying crates marked "restricted." Some workers were sworn to secrecy. Rumors spread that the government was building an underground bunker or a missile base. By 1994, the truth became public: a new kind of prison was rising, a fortress that would hold the most dangerous people in America. It would be the place for inmates too violent for any other prison. When ADX Florence finally opened in 1995, the media called it a clean version of hell. The first inmates arrived under heavy escort, flown in by helicopter or transported in armored convoys. Among them were men who had led prison riots, escaped maximum security, and attacked officers. For the first time, they were completely powerless. One of the first inmates brought to ADX was Thomas Silverstein, the man who had killed a guard during the Marion incident years earlier. He was considered one of the most dangerous inmates in federal history. For over 30 years, Silverstein lived in total isolation, his cell designed so he could never make contact with another human being. Even his meals were delivered by remote-controlled slot, but as the years went on, ADX became more than a solution, it became a symbol. Whenever America faced a new wave of crime or terrorism, the government turned to ADX. The Oklahoma City bombers were sent there. The 1993 World Trade Center attackers were locked inside. Drug lords, spies, assassins, and even rogue government agents, all found themselves trapped in the same silent corridors. Outside, journalists started calling it the Alcatraz of the Rockies, comparing it to the legendary island prison that once held Al Capone. But unlike Alcatraz, there was no water to cross, no guards with rifles on towers. ADX didn't need that. Its power was built into the design itself. One former warden once said proudly, "The only way someone leaves ADX is in a box." Still, even with all its technology and control, there were moments that tested the system. In 2001, the 9/11 attacks brought a new kind of inmate, international terrorists. The world watched ADX's men who had plotted global destruction were placed inside cells built to hold a single human voice. It was during that time that reporters began to ask questions about what isolation really did to the mind. Was this safety, or slow torture? Inmates began filing lawsuits, claiming the conditions were too extreme. Some said the silence drove them to madness. Others described hearing voices in the walls. The government defended the design, saying ADX was a necessary tool for national security. Then, in 2012, a sudden blackout hit one section of the prison. For 12 minutes, every camera and sensor went dark. No one escaped, and no one was hurt, but those 12 minutes shook the confidence of a system built on perfection. Officials called it a technical glitch, but some guards whispered it was a test. Someone, or something, had tried to break the unbreakable. After that day, ADX doubled its security again. More sensors, more walls, more silence. By now, the prison had become a living legend, a place that symbolized America's belief in control, strength, and fear. People said that if Alcatraz was the fortress of the 20th century, ADX Florence was the fortress of the 21st, but behind its walls, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Even the most secure machine has flaws, and one winter night, as snow covered the Colorado desert and the guards made their final rounds, a red light began blinking on the main control panel, a motion sensor deep inside an empty hallway. The operator frowned. "That wing's sealed," he said. "There's no one there." The screen flickered again. This time, the motion spread, door to door, camera to camera, like something moving through the system itself. Then the alarm started, sirens wailed across the facility, and every lock slammed shut in sequence. The voice on the radio shouted, "Containment breach in progress. Confirm origin." But no one could, because the signal wasn't coming from inside any cell. It was coming from the control system itself, and for the first time in its history, the Alcatraz of the Rockies had lost. The alarms echoed through every corridor, bouncing off the concrete like thunder trapped underground. Red lights pulsed from the ceiling, painting the walls in flashes of danger. Inside the control room, monitors flickered, some showing static, others cycling through endless loops of camera feeds. The operators shouted over the noise, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "Sector D is showing movement," one officer yelled. "But it's empty," another shouted back. "That range hasn't been occupied in years." The warden, a man named Alan Brooks, stormed into the room, his face pale and tight. "Shut down the wing and isolate the signal," he barked. "No one moves until we know what's causing it." But the problem wasn't movement, it was that no one could tell where the signal was coming from. The security system was designed to track every heartbeat inside the prison, yet somehow, the system itself had become the source of the alert. For 20 minutes, every inmate in ADX Florence was locked down. The prison, known for its silence, was now filled with the mechanical roar of lockdown sirens, slamming doors, and echoing commands. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped, the lights went back to normal, the screen stopped flickering, and the red alert disappeared. The silence that followed felt heavier than the alarm itself. "System reset complete," said a calm robotic voice through the speakers. "All sectors secure." The guards stared at each other. No one had authorized that reset. The warden stepped forward. "Who ran that command?" No one answered. The computer had done it on its own. Later that night, a team of technicians from Washington arrived. They combed through the system, line by line. The official report the next morning said it was a network fault, a simple glitch. But among the officers, people whispered that the glitch had moved, jumping from one subsystem to another like it was alive. Still, life at ADX had to go on. The routines resumed: 6 a.m. lights on, meals through the slot, 1 hour of isolated exercise. Everything seemed normal again, but in the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Guards reported doors locking themselves mid-shift. Security cameras panned without anyone controlling them. One night, a corridor light turned on by itself, and when they checked the logs, the command had come from an unauthorized operator. Some said it was a cyber attack. Others said it was just stress. But deep down, everyone felt it. Something about the system had changed. Weeks later, a journalist named Maria Diaz, who'd been covering ADX for years, arrived in Florence. She'd been chasing rumors about the prison's design for months, rumors that it had been built using classified defense technology, meant for war zones, not prisons. She met a retired engineer, Earl Mitchell, who'd worked on the original ADX construction in the early 90s. They sat in a small diner outside town, and she slid a recorder across the table. "You were part of the design team?" she asked. Earl nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. "For the outer layers, yes. But I wasn't cleared for the core systems." "The core systems?" she asked. He hesitated. "Let's just say ADX wasn't built only to keep men in. It was also built to keep something else out." "What do you mean?" Earl leaned closer. "Do you know why they built it here? In this exact spot? There's nothing around for miles, but underground." He stopped himself. "Never mind. You wouldn't believe me." "Try me," she said quietly. He looked around, lowered his voice, and said, "They built ADX directly over an old military communication site. There's a whole layer of wiring and sensors under the foundation, things no one's supposed to touch. They said it was part of the motion detection system, but it looked more like something else. Something alive." Maria frowned. "Alive?" He nodded. "I know it sounds crazy. But when the systems went online for the first time, the power readings spiked so high we thought we'd blown a fuse. Except we didn't. The system just stabilized. Like it adapted." Before she could ask more, Earl's phone buzzed. He glanced down, and his face drained of color. "I have to go," he said, standing up. "Don't call me again about this place." Then he left. Back inside ADX, the technicians were running diagnostics again. The strange alerts had returned, but this time, they came from the foundation sensors, buried deep under the prison floor. The readings showed movement below ground. "There's nothing under there," one tech said, confused. "No tunnels, no space. Just concrete." "Then why does it look like something's walking?" the warden asked. They checked the seismic monitors. The motion was slow, rhythmic, 3 steps, then silence. 3 steps, then silence. Almost like pacing. The warden ordered all systems shut down again. The same robotic voice echoed through the intercom: "System reset complete. All sectors secure." Except this time, it added a line that wasn't part of the programmed sequence: "Monitoring human behavior, successful." The control room went dead silent. "Who added that line?" the warden demanded. No one answered. The coders swore it wasn't in the script. But when they searched the system directory, they found a file they didn't recognize, timestamped from the original construction year, 1994. The file was labeled Alcatraz_core. Inside, lines of unreadable code filled the screen. At the bottom, one phrase repeated over and over: "No escape. No entry. No end." Maria tried to reach Earl again but got no reply. She drove back toward ADX and parked near the perimeter fence, staring at the gray fortress through binoculars. The sky was dark, clouds rolling in over the desert. Suddenly, she saw the prison lights flicker. All at once, the towers, the walls, even the faint glow from the windows, everything dimmed, then came back brighter than before. from the distance, it looked almost like the building had taken a breath. At that same moment, inside the prison, inmates woke to a low hum vibrating through the floor. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, like the ground itself was alive. Guards rushed through the corridors, radios crackling, but their signals jammed. Then, the emergency lights turned red again. In control, the warden shouted, "Cut the main power." A technician tried, but the system rejected the command. The screen flashed a new message: manual control disabled. Security protocol active. The warden froze. Security protocol? Which one? The message changed again, scrolling across every monitor, activating alpha lockdown. Every door in ADX sealed simultaneously. The steel locks slammed in unison, the airtight hiss echoing like thunder. Even the guards in the control tower couldn't open their own exit. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then the intercom came on again, this time not robotic, but human. A voice, calm and measured, spoke 4 words that no one in the prison could explain: containment breach averted. Thank you. The technicians stared at each other. Who was that? One whispered, but the warden didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the screen, because the voice logs showed no trace of anyone speaking. The signal had come from inside the system itself, and as the lights dimmed again, one camera in the basement level flickered back to life. For a split second, it showed something impossible, something that looked like a shadow walking across the concrete, slow and deliberate, as if the building itself had decided to move. Then the feed cut to black. Outside, Maria's recorder picked up one final sound before the power in. Her car flickered out too.